Hello. Thank you for choosing The Gaze. Today we will discuss a topic that concerns and interests the entire civilized world. The issue of arming and supplying weapons to Ukraine, a country currently at war for the safety of all of Europe. With us, our unwavering and inquisitive Henry King.
Imagine a brutal thug breaks into your house and you just don't have no guns. All you have is roses because you're so very peaceful. Why does it take so long for the world to understand that Ukraine is fighting for human values and it needs weapons now? Well, being unwavering and inquisitive, I just can't help it to delve into the topic of providing more weaponry to Ukraine now, a country embroiled in war. This discussion holds significant importance not only for the countries directly involved in the conflict, but also for global stability. Let's find out why. Ukraine is needed support in its, with no exaggeration, great war by a large number of partners and allies, one of the main of which is the United States, of course. They provide assistance to Ukraine mainly through the Pentagon Reserve's Presidential Reduction System. In addition, the United States is helping through the USAI initiative by contracting the weapons production industry major players directly. Also, America adopted no less but a separate law on Lend-Lease for Ukraine. It was approved last year in May. The document was valid until the end of fiscal 2023, which ended on September 30th. The adoption of Lend-Lease in Ukraine echoed in the world as historic step. Technically, the law gave President Biden the right to transfer America-originated weapons to Ukraine directly, without traditional legal and commercial bureaucratic procedures. But in reality, Lend-Lease was never actually used, because the United States was already providing back then and continues to provide American weapons to Ukraine to this very day. On September 30th, the US Congress approved a temporary state budget that will allow the government to operate for another 45 days. It does not include anything on further assistance for Ukraine, since it is temporary. On the contrary of American support for Ukraine, Kyiv has received and will continue to receive all weapons and other support allocated by the United States during these days and beyond, simply because all of the relevant discussions were made way beforehand. The temporary budget was adopted as a mean of compromise between Democrats and Republicans so as not to stop funding government programs and avoid a shutdown. Let us talk for more in figures. Here is the fact. The volume of the United States military and other assistance is one of the largest among partners and reached almost $77 billion. Of that total pie, the military aid slice is about $46.6 billion, the share of economic support is $20.5 billion, and another $2.6 billion is humanitarian aid. That includes weapons, training, medicine, generators, rehab, you name it. Experts assume the aid amount not as expenses, but as an investment. A major investment in the US ally, the likes of which have not been seen since at least World War II. Then came the Marshall Plan, inflation-wise amended, mounted in about $150 billion over 3 years. Yet, according to the Kiel Institute of World Economics, Europe now spends, or rather said invests, a larger share of its GDP on Ukraine than the United States. The Baltic countries allocated the largest share of their GDP, Estonia 1.26%, Latvia 1.9%, and Lithuania 0.95%. This is followed by Poland 0.68%, Slovakia 0.63%, Denmark 0.51%, and the United States share is 0.33%, ranking 12th. I very much believe we have a new global trend here, are we not? By the way, the EU's reaction was not long in coming reasonable and grounded hopes that the United States will continue to support Ukraine. The head of European diplomacy, Josep Borrell, expressed during a visit to Kyiv earlier this October. He says European officials were surprised by the decision of the US Congress to pass the budget without announcing their help for Kyiv.
For us, Europeans, allow me to repeat it, it's an existential threat. And that's why we have to continue supporting them and discussing with our American allies and friends for them to continue supporting. And I am sure that this decision will be reconsidered and altogether will be unused.
Ukraine tracks all weapons supplied by American partners by the means of a system to which the United States has all necessary access. This was stated officially by Ukrainian side. Moreover, in July last year, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine created a special temporary committee to monitor the flow and the use of all the international aid, in particular weaponry. In October, the leading Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Defense, Robert Storch, will audit and monitor the distribution of American funds in Ukraine. He will work in close alliance with the State Department of the United States and the United States Agency for International Development to make sure the American aid for Ukraine is distributed properly and all the ins and outs are transparent and clear.
Watch this.
Allow me to tell you a bit more about who Robert Storch is. Robert Storch is an American lawyer and official who served as an Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Defense under the leadership of Joe Biden. He previously served as Inspector General for the National Security Agency. Storch was Chief of the Appellate Division and Senior Litigation Counsel and the District of Columbia Counterterrorism Coordinator in the U.S. Department of Public Integrity section. In November 2021, President Joe Biden nominated Storch for the Department of Defense Inspector General position, a position for which no nominee has been ever confirmed by the Senate since 2016. Storch was and moved into the office on December 6, 2022. Robert Storch is well known in Ukraine. In 2017, he was nominated by representatives of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Preventing and Combating Corruption. He applied for the position of member of the External Control Commission for auditing the activities of NABU. Back then, the Ukrainian Parliament did not give its approval for him. Today, Storch has already created a new team in Ukraine to better monitor U.S. aid assistance. One of the high-ranking U.S. representatives has already started working in Ukraine at the end of August, and additional personnel are expected to arrive this fall. What is going on next? We don't know, but we can talk about it for more with our next guest.
Watch this.
Alexandra Ustinova, the Member of Ukrainian Parliament. Hello, Alexandra.
Hi, it's nice to hear you.
It is nice to hear and see you indeed. Let me ask my first question. Would you mind to talk us through how exactly is the control of the weapons distribution carried out by the United States and the allies here in Ukraine, I mean? Any specific mechanisms?
There are a lot of specific mechanisms that were actually introduced by Ukrainians to make sure that our international partners are aware of every type of weapon and where every type of weapon is. So first of all, we had recently introduced LOGPAS, which is the international NATO standard program that is being used in a lot of the armies of the world, especially NATO countries. So far we have... So basically, you can come in, type any type of weapon, let's say Javelin, Bradley, or anything, and see how many in each brigade is. So we have provided access to the British Army. We had provided access to the American Army. So there are people, certain people assigned in the embassies who have direct access to this program, who can see how many Bradleys, how many Javelins, or how many Strikers, or any other type of weapon are in each brigade. Of course, we are not disclosing the information on the exact location of this brigade, but they can for sure see how many of those are there available. Second, if we are losing any type of weapon, let's say that the type of weapons that are of very high importance for the United States, they have a so-called program called end-user monitoring. So there are a certain type of weapons that they care about because of the technology. If we lose those types of weapons, we always provide the serial numbers of each piece to the United States Embassy, just to make sure if anything, let's say a Javelin or a night vision monitor pumps up somewhere in Iraq or Iran or, I don't know, Afghanistan or any other country, we're not being accused of smuggling because we provided the information that this item was lost at this battlefield. And here it is how it was lost.
Right.
We already had cases, let's say in Mariupol, when we had a helicopter carrying a lot of equipment, a lot of the weapons, and this helicopter was shot down. So mainly we're talking about Javelins, we're talking about the Stingers, so the anti-tanks weapon. And we provided the number of every piece that was on the board, just in case it wasn't totally destroyed, because we couldn't check when the helicopter was shot down by the Russians, whether it was destroyed or lost. So we provided the serial numbers just in case it pumps up somewhere that this type of weapon was lost exactly at this location. That's how it was lost. And the third and very important, and this is a know-how from Ukrainians and the Americans, all the American weapons that are of the end-user monitoring that are coming to Ukraine have a special barcode on them. This barcode is being scanned first in the United States when it is being shipped. Then it is being scanned in Russia, which is the international military base where all the international equipment is being delivered, the international military aid. And then we are scanning it in Ukraine when it is being delivered. So Americans provided Ukrainians with the scanners. They basically taught our military how to use those. And now we're scanning their equipment up to the end user so they can see how it is moving and how it is being used.
So exactly as my grandfather once told me, he said, if you want to hide something, make it transparent, don't hide it. So that's a very smart move. That's what you do, guys. You just make it absolutely open. Everyone can see there is no smuggling. And actually, well, of course, items are lost, lives are lost, the wars are ongoing. So it's absolutely reasonable to do what you did. Still, people talk about corruption, but zero tolerance towards corruption. Is that a growing trend, and not only amongst Ukraine and its partners? Because I've seen that in America, everyone talks about corruption, tries to fight it. But I don't think everyone is fighting it that hard as Ukraine, because for Ukraine is the must. What is being done? What's going on about corruption? Can you comment on that?
So first of all, for people who are watching us today, I just want to say that before running for the parliament, I used to work for an anti-corruption NGO, and I was the one who was advocating for creating anti-corruption institutions in Ukraine, like Anti-Corruption Bureau, Anti-Corruption Prosecution, and Anti-Corruption Court. And the first thing I would like everyone to understand, if Putin succeeded in corrupting Ukrainians, he would not need to invade. Because if everyone in the Ukrainian parliament was corrupt, they would vote just being paid for whatever Putin needed. If everybody was corrupt in the government, they would do whatever Putin wanted. Unfortunately, that's what happened, let's say, in countries like Belarus because of the corruption and because of the tyranny. But he failed in Ukraine. And because of that, he had to invade physically with his army. And that's what he was complaining about in his speech on the 21st, 3 days before the invasion. If you watch his speech, he is saying, these Ukrainians created these anti-corruption institutions funded by the Americans. They are guided by the Americans. They listen what the international people are telling them to do. Well, yes, we do, because this is something we should be doing ourselves, but that's good we have international partners helping us. And yes, we succeeded fighting corruption. We now have judges in jail. We have former members of the parliament in jail. And because we succeeded, and I'm not saying we have a zero corruption in the country, but we succeeded to start the fight, Putin had to invade because there was no other chance for him to actually take over Ukraine. Second thing I'm being asked, especially when all these big corruption cases are being brought up, when the head of the Supreme Court was arrested, I had a lot of calls from our international partners asking me, Sasha, what is going on? I was telling them, you know what? We're fighting corruption even when the war is on.
Yeah, obviously.
Can you imagine in any country of the world, the head of the Supreme Court being arrested and there was no leak of information? We are in the middle of the most high-intensive war after the Second World War II.
Indeed.
And we are still managing to do that. What I was telling them, if no one went to jail after the corruption scandals become public, and if you didn't see actually high-level politicians, judges going to jail, then you would have to ask us questions. But it is happening. We are doing our homework. There is a lot to be done, but we are working on that.
Does it work the other way around? I mean, the monitoring just as well. Are there any similar monitoring mechanisms in the context of, like, monitoring the spendings of funds for European Union countries? How does it happen? I mean, and if you know, maybe you know the examples. I mean, corruption is probably the most international evil ever. So please explain. What part in percent, if you can, the weaponry aid, I'm already running into my other question. So let me step back and ask, if you can monitor the corruption, or we can monitor the system, in the whole system, political system, say in Germany, how does it happen? Anyone in the world have the same system as Ukraine has now?
The first thing I want everybody to understand, 100% of the Ukrainian budget is being spent on war. So everything, starting with the salaries for all our soldiers and ending up in buying munition, tanks, and stuff like that, is paid by the Ukrainian government. Our international partners are supporting us with a lot of the investments. It's called the direct budget financing. We have $1.5 billion from the United States and 1.5 billion euros from European Union every month. Basically, that's how we survive. And that's why we are grateful for our international partners, because we can sustain, we can survive as a country because there is support coming from international donors. But on the other side, the international donors are telling us how to spend this money. So it's not Ukraine who decides that we want to buy, let's say, a new trolley bus, a new tram, or build a new school with this money. The international donors are those who are telling us this money are being spent on procurement of medicines. Right. This money should be spent on paying salaries to your doctors. These money should be spent on paying salaries to your teachers. Honestly, it is very difficult to steal from the salaries of a teacher. It's very difficult to steal from a salary of a doctor. And it is really helpful that these direct budget lines that the international donors are providing money with is something they pick up and they are monitoring. And they know that this is something that it is almost impossible to steal from. We are not spending this money on procurement of any types of equipment or something like that. We're using our money for that. But the international donors are telling us where to spend their money, not we are asking them or telling them where we should be spending them.
Again, transparency is the best answer to all the acquisitions and corruption, and a great job done indeed. Igor Kolomoisky, what do you know about the case? Any updates? I can see you smiling. The whole world does. Why are you smiling?
Because I remember that was a huge case against President Zelensky when he ran for his position, in his presidency. Everybody saw him as the puppet of Kolomoisky, and everybody was telling us that he is under this oligarch. And he was actually the first president who managed to put this oligarch in jail. It wasn't him, but because he provided an independent law enforcement and independent investigation, there was no political persecution or anything related to that. This person ended up in jail, and he's there now. And the second case, which is obvious for everyone abroad, is a case against Kolomoisky in the United States, so-called the Cleveland case, because Kolomoisky is being claimed to receive a lot of money for Privatbank. Those were the state money, the Ukrainian money from the Ukrainian budget to restore one of the biggest, actually the biggest bank in Ukraine. But he money laundered that and invested it in property in Cleveland, Ohio, and ended up that it was the FBI and the United States law enforcement who started a case against that. And now the only thing I'm watching is the movie, who's going to be the first one to put him in jail, whether it's going to be the Ukrainian court or it's going to be the Americans who would be asking to send him back to the United States because they would want Kolomoisky to face the trial in the United States.
So it was like a race to who's gonna hunt him first. Well, maybe this is not maybe that was not the wisest decision to buy some property in Cleveland, Ohio, where Abrams tanks are made just now. Well, he should have buy some Abrams tanks for Ukraine. That would be, I don't know how much money these people need to finally stop smuggling and stealing and finding some schemes. I mean, I believe a couple of $1 billion is already enough, but no, it's an insatiable thing. You always keep on going. Alexandra, thank you very much for this conversation and for your experience and for what you did, for the anti-corruption thing that you did and for what you are doing. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I hope to hear about you soon, to talk for more in our next episodes, maybe.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure as well.
Thank you, Alexandra. See you. Goodbye. Good evening. Thank you so very much for this lovely conversation. Let me ask something, exactly something that usually has all the answers. ChatGPT answers the question. How important is the role of the allied countries in the war?
The role of allies in a war is important at all stages of the conflict, from the preparations for war to its conclusion. The importance of the role of allies can be determined by several key aspects. Military support. Allies can provide additional troops, equipment, weapons, and other military support. This helps increase the resources and capabilities of the leading country to conduct military operations. Political support. Allies can help garner support from the international community and create a common position on the conflict. Economic support. Economic and humanitarian aid from allies can help ensure the well-being of the population of the leading country and reduce economic losses due to the war. Moral support. The support of allies can boost the morale and spirit of both the military and civilian population of the leading country. Diplomatic activity. Joint diplomatic efforts by allies can contribute to conflict resolution and ensure compliance with international law. Resources and intellectual potential. Allies can provide additional resources and intellectual potential to address strategic challenges. Thus, the role of allies is extremely important in all aspects of a war and can significantly influence its outcome and subsequent consequence.
Watch this.
The whole thing to gain full control over provided weaponry for Ukraine took its start in part due to criticism towards the Republican Party. At the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, support for Ukraine in the US Congress and among the Republican Party was, without any exaggeration, enormous. In April 2022, 196 Republicans in the House of Representatives voted pro the Lend-Lease bill and only 10 voted con. Since then, the Republican Party's skepticism towards Ukraine was only intensifying. As solid proof of such, the midterm elections in November 2022 can be taken, in which Republicans enjoyed a slight majority in the House of Representatives, and the far-right informal association Freedom Caucus strengthened its position. The Freedom Caucus influence significantly sprouted this summer when its most prominent representatives, the controversial Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz, introduced the amendments to the National Defense Authorization Bill. It was Taylor Greene who submitted a resolution to Congress to audit fines provided by the United States to Ukraine back in 2022. Currently, she continues to criticize Biden for supporting Kyiv. Skeptical House Republicans are demanding that aid to Ukraine be voted on separately from other federal spendings. There are at least several ideologically distinct groups within the Republican Party. They are pro- and anti-Ukrainian clusters, the so-called conservatives, who do their best, or worst, rather said, to make up the image of the good old Republican Party. But the most media visible and the least pro-Ukrainian are the Trumpists, or MAGA Republicans, short for the famous slogan, "Make America Great Again." Well, the only thing to add here is that US President Joe Biden called Trump's followers something dangerous. He called the MAGA movement extremist and said he does not share the core beliefs of American democracy. Despite all of the above said and shown, the United States Congress maintains a mighty support for Ukraine amongst the majority of legislators from both parties. And Ukraine is still receiving its means to protect the whole world from the evil aggressor in the frown face of Vladimir Putin and all of Russia. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken also assures us of this. He argues that similar support continues among the American public.
If you look at polling, which is not what's driving things, but at least some of the polls I've seen recently suggest that there is strong, enduring support for our support for Ukraine. In Congress, yes, there are some loud voices that are taking a different tack, but if you look at the majority in both parties, the support is there and it's sustained. I've had an opportunity to spend some time with Leader Mitch McConnell, it's clear, the House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Mike McCall.
The support is there, it is. Sometimes it takes really time for the weaponry to get to Ukraine. Why? Let's talk about that for more with our next guest.
Watch this.
Mr. Jason Smart, American political strategist and scientist. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Great to see you.
I just feel like we can use some advice from a political scientist and strategist these hustle days. So my first question is, all the aid the United States has already provided for Ukraine barely amounts to 0.65% of federal spending. So Ukraine has molded the nation into a fighting force and defends not only its own security, but also the security of Europe and its values, Western values, human values, if you say. The question is, how can keep on bargaining when purchasing such a priceless thing at such a ridiculously low price? Why is it taking so long for the weaponry finally to be delivered from the world to Ukraine?
Well, I think that there's a few reasons. First, I think it's more important to understand why the U.S. is not interested in helping Ukraine more at this point. From what we've seen in the public opinion polling, we see now it is a minority of Republicans, who wish to support Ukraine. The numbers of Democrats have also decreased dramatically. And the overall U.S. population, fortunately, does still support Ukraine and support more assistance for Ukraine, but the numbers have changed substantially in the past few months. And the primary reason for that is that it appears that Americans do not understand what is happening in Ukraine. It's not in the news as much as it used to be before. And more than that, they don't see what they would understand to be success. They don't understand that there's a counteroffensive right now, what that counteroffensive means, that it's going to be a long process. They think it's become sort of a frozen conflict. And this lack of understanding is something that leads them to have less faith that Ukraine is going to be a victory, and so less interest in supporting it.
So it's more like a show. They're waiting for General Zelensky just to win, just like that, without air superiority, without even air support. So what can we do about it? What shall we do? You as a scientist, as a strategist, give us a strategy. How can we help United States to understand what is going on right now in Ukraine? That it is really important to defend human values all across the human universe, not just in Oklahoma or in New York, but in Ukraine just as well.
Well, there's a lot of polling that's been done about this in the United States, and there's a couple of things that we know. We know that Americans, once they understand the amount of financial support and they understand that it's not a lot in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it equates to about 3.5% of the military budget. It equates to about 27 minutes of the U.S. federal government spending. So it's not huge amounts. America can afford it. At the same time, we understand that Americans, if they understand that Russia is losing, that is 50% of the Russian military has been destroyed through this assistance, then they become much more supportive of the war. They realize it's a good return on investment. And they realize it's something that is winnable. And so the interest remains much, much higher. Ukraine, at this point, though, should do what other countries do. Essentially, every country in the United States that has an embassy does, which is lobbying. And lobbying does not mean meetings in Washington, D.C. alone. It means television ads, it means radio ads, it means digital ads. So Americans understand what is going on in Ukraine and why this war is still relevant.
So it's more like a presence, the constant presence on the media markets, if you say.
Exactly right. So because just think about it, anything else in this world, life goes on. There are news stories every day.
Absolutely.
Totally unrelated, and things that are going on in our country. For instance, polling shows that Americans are very concerned by illegal immigration in the first place. There's essentially 12 million illegal immigrants in the U.S. That 12 million people, they're desperate to figure out a solution. China is viewed as a major threat. China is a threat to the United States, undoubtedly. So they say, well, if we have a choice, Russia's very far away and it's not really a danger to us, whereas the Chinese are taking American jobs. They are a threat to espionage in the United States, a significant threat. They do steal American technology significantly. And so that is what the priority that Americans see every day. So we have to bring to their mind what is going on and what Russia poses a threat, not just to Ukraine, but to all of Europe and hence to NATO and hence to the United States.
Well, I just returned from New York. I was in United Nations headquarters. In there, it's more or less clear, but out there in the street, some people, when I asked, do you know, just like ordinary passerby, I asked him, do you know what's going on in Ukraine? And he was like, is that in Russia?
Sadly, I believe it. The fact is, out of sight, out of mind, as they say. There's a lot of things going every day, and if it's not in the news daily, if people do not see what's going on, then support decreases. And we see that now in the Congress as it's choosing a new speaker. Of course, I'm very carefully watching who might support Ukraine. But we do see, look at Congress, the number of Republicans that have voted against Ukraine, some Democratic support's also becoming softer. These are all things that Ukraine needs to be working to inform members of Congress why this is valuable to the U.S.'s interest, not just Ukraine. It's quite obvious why it's interesting to Ukraine to receive these weapons, but how that helps America as well.
Yeah, just to sell the proper idea. I understand that. My next question is, how do you think that Stand for Ukraine paradigm will change as elections approach? Well, you obviously answered that already. So if we are not present on the media market...
So the question is this, is how will Ukraine portray itself leading to elections? Unfortunately, it's being cast as somewhat of a Democratic issue. That is, it's a Biden initiative, which is unfortunate. It should never have become this way. It should have been bipartisan the whole time and not viewed as something that was purely, Biden's. It should have been viewed as America's interest to support Ukraine. And so that was, I think, a serious failure to control the messaging. How is it that, Kyiv could have better controlled that to make sure it had bipartisan support the whole time, to work with both political parties? It would be very short-sighted just to assume that White House support equals American support. The White House does change, and I doubt if President Biden will be reelected. So who will come next? The Ukraine has to be working with both political parties to make sure it has support everywhere it goes.
Absolutely lovely to have that professional answer. The thought was running, reminder, but now I understand that Joseph Biden is certainly a prominent figure, but United States is something even bigger. And we have to be addressing the people of United States.
Absolutely the case. The average American in Ohio, why would he support Ukraine? This is very far from him. It's not something directly relates to him. It's something that's very hard for him to grasp how it directly influences him. But if you understand that Abrams tanks are produced in Ohio, you realize how many jobs are created by that, how much of a tax base is created by that, and how beneficial it is to the state of Ohio. The people there are directly benefiting from this. And that's why I've recommended to Ukrainian officials, don't always come to Washington, D.C. I think it's actually probably a bad use of money and time. Much better is to travel to places like Ohio, to the Abrams tank factory, and then talk with workers there. Explain exactly, that one, Ukraine is thankful. Gratitude always counts for a lot. But secondly, is that this is something that we are working together. This is not Ukraine's war. This is Ukraine and the United States partners working together to defeat this Russian fascism.
For the first time in U.S. history, Speaker of Congress Kevin McCarthy was stripped of his chair. And this is the third highest ranking in the state, if I'm not mistaken. What does it mean for the United States and what might it lead to?
So for the U.S., it means a few more days of uncertainty. It seems quite probable today, though, there might actually be a vote. But it appears, yes. It appears that the new speaker is probably going to be, it's still unclear, but Steve Scalise is the front runner right now. And if he were to be elected, he is said to be sympathetic to Ukraine. He is said to have interest in it. At the same time, he is going to probably be somewhat obstructionist to what the White House wants to do, because that's the nature of American politics, unfortunately. But once again, I think this is why Ukraine needs to prioritize urgently beginning large-scale lobbying, that is information campaigns, in the United States, so that average American voters are demanding that their congressman or Congressman Scalise takes actions necessary to support Ukraine.
Well, American voters, is it possible that Donald Trump will become the new Speaker of the Congress, you think?
No, I don't think Donald Trump will become the Speaker. He's too busy right now with his fraud case in New York.
Mr. Jason Smart was with us. Thank you so very much for your experience and for your smart, pardon me for that, advices. Hope to hear from you soon. Hope to talk with you. It was a really lovely conversation. I would love to repeat that once.
Love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, sir. Goodbye. Thank you so very much for your conversation. This is the world of problems. The problems that we know about must and can be solved. How to do that? There is one more nuance where aid to Ukraine bumps into resistance, so to speak, due to disagreements between the Pentagon and the US State Department over the weaponry. For the Ukrainian Defense Forces, the United States has been slower to approve Ukrainian military aid requests. As Politica puts it, citing an incognito official of the presidential administration that describes the discrepancies in the views of the two services. Well, of course, while the State Department is looking for opportunities, the Department of Defense is looking for threats. The latest example is the ATACMS long-range tactical missile system, which the United States President Joe Biden agreed to deliver to Ukraine only this September after more than a year of debate. The Pentagon initially resisted delivering the missile complex because the US arsenal had none to spare. At the same time, US officials constantly say that the country will provide Ukraine with any weaponry it needs. Ukraine needs more weaponry as soon as possible right now. It is obvious for Ukrainians. Is it obvious for the rest of the world? Let's find out.
Watch this.
Mr. Stephen Moore, former chief of staff to the Republican leader and founder of the charity project Ukraine Freedom Project. Mr. Moore, sir, hello.
Hey, great to see you.
Great to see you back. Sorry to break you like that, so straightforward. But why did the decision to transfer ATACMS to Ukraine take so long to be approved? Politically?
Good question. In America, we've got problems on the far right with the Republicans wanting to hold up aid to Ukraine. And then the problems with the administration is that they'll promise things that take a long time to get here. I'm glad to see the ATACMS just got here. Why this happens so slowly is a mystery to me. What is the job of the U.S. Department of Defense, if not to get weapons to a war zone quickly? I think it has more to do with domestic politics than anything going on in Ukraine, as all this does. President Biden has people worried about provoking Russia, and Russia is really good at talking about nuclear weapons all the time. And this is a disincentive to sending ATACMS.
Well, Russia is talking about the nuclear weapons, that's right, but so what? I mean,
I live in Kyiv.
Yeah,
I live in Kyiv. I'm first on the target list, as are you. So, and I agree, because what we're trying to figure out here is how much can a nuclear power blackmail the rest of the world into doing its bidding? And that's the question we're going to find the answer to.
Okay, I take that as an answer. My next question, at what level is the aid to Ukraine the most hampered in the United States, you think? What is the level? Maybe you can give us some names, Mr. Moore. Go ahead.
Well, here's what's happened is that I'd like to tell you, listen, I can tell you all about the situation with the aid to Ukraine before the speaker got voted out.
Oh, right. Okay.
Now it's totally up in the air. What Republicans wanted was border money to help the crisis at the border
right.
in exchange for Ukraine money. And they didn't want to vote Biden sending these $24 billion 3-month tranches to Congress. So Congress has to vote again and again and again. And it's painful. So they're just like, send us all you want. Let's get it done through the election. And that's what they wanted before Kevin McCarthy was voted out as Speaker. Now, if Jim Jordan, congressman from Ohio, if he is elected as Speaker of the House, then it gets really, really difficult for Ukraine.
But, I mean, Abrams tanks are made in Ohio, right?
Yes.
So maybe.
And
why so different and why so difficult, you think, if going seriously?
Yeah, sure. And there's a number of answers to that. Let me start with the fact that Kremlin propaganda has made its way into the conservative ecosphere with Tucker Carlson as a start. I mean, with that guy, you can watch Kremlin propagandists on Tuesday. Tucker Carlson will repeat what they said on Wednesday, and then they'll take a clip from his show on Thursday. And that's what's getting to Americans, and that's what's getting to Republicans, and that's what's getting to the far right. And that's the people that Jim Jordan listens to. So the idea anymore that the defense and industrial complex is some megalith that, you know, the Congress is slavishly following is not true. And it's getting difficult to corral these members of Congress that have this nonsense in their head.
No way we can change things, you think? Or I will rephrase my question. How we do it? What should we do to turn the tables, to turn the heads?
Well, and there's some easy things that Ukraine and Ukrainians can do. One, Ukraine is done a fabulous job in winning this war against the Russians. I mean, you know this better than I do. I've been here since day 5 of the war, and I've watched Kyiv go from a city under siege to some place that's really nice to go have coffee on the street during the summer. And it's been great. But nobody in America knows that. I go home, people ask me, can you get food in Kyiv? Yeah, this is true. So Ukraine needs to be more aggressive in telling about the story of their victories and getting them specifically into the conservative ecosphere. Two, my associate, Anna Shvetsova, who's the COO of the Ukraine Freedom Project, she and I went to the United States for the last couple of weeks, and she just thanked every American she met. And thank them, your weapons, the American weapons, are keeping my family safe. And she would just say that over and over again. And people cried. Americans cried. Yeah. And so just it's as simple as, there should be a massive, massive thank you effort, and I think that sort of thing could make a difference.
That's another Thanksgiving, literally.
You're good, man. That was good.
My next question, maybe not too bad again. What potential does the United States have to support Ukraine? I mean, let me rephrase that one for you. Do we have enough potential? There is. And the United States, of course. Is there enough potential? I believe it is, but I just want to reinsert it.
And I mean, if you're talking about potential within the U.S. Armed Forces and within the U.S. government, this is actually a really good deal. The Americans are spending an amount equal to 3% of the federal budget 3% of the budget of the Pentagon on weapons to Ukraine.
Exactly.
And for that amount of money, you guys have taken back 87% of your country and degraded Putin's warfighting capability by half. So, at 3%, that's a great deal. What I tell Americans is that Ukrainians view themselves as our partners. We provide the weapons, they provide the lives of their very best people. And that makes a difference when I say that. But there is plenty of weaponry in the United States that could help Ukraine.
Thank you. This is all I can say. But my next question. Why was the Land-Lease Law never actually applied, never worked? Do you believe a similar document can be ever adopted in the future? It was a historical one, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, that was historical. And again, we have just got the thing in we can take any legislative idea that you have, like this one, which is very good, and then it's not something where rationality really makes a difference. What it is getting good information about Ukrainian victories, about the value of this, because there's nothing that you're going to get through the Republican-held House of Representatives with the word Ukraine on it without a big fight. And so it's really frustrating as an American who's worked in Congress, because the president wants this, a majority of the Senate wants this, and a majority of the House wants this. Who doesn't want this is about 65 far-right Republicans who have voted against Ukraine aid at every opportunity.
Well, Democrats and Republicans, the usual story. I mean, the founding fathers probably wanted not the democracy, but exactly that process. And that is hard. This is frustrating. I agree with you. But this is the only way how you avoid dictatorship. This is the only way. This is why America is great, was great, is great, and will be great, because Republicans and Democrats will keep on fighting no matter what. But what is frustrating, like, of course, for you being in Kiev, that is frustrating because Russian missiles and air raids are blurring in the air, and this is kind of frustrating. And if you take it from 3% of the budget, of the military budget, to like 6%, you can already be winning the war. That is frustrating.
Oh yeah, completely. And that's what also, there's a lot of us that say that. If we had given the Ukrainians the weapons they needed to win a year and a half ago, we wouldn't be talking about this war anymore.
There you go. Okay, what political or battlefield disposition in Ukraine could accelerate the transfer of the F-16 fighter jets, finally, for Ukraine?
Yeah. I live on the top floor of my apartment building. I keep looking outside. I don't see any F-16s.
No?
And no, not a one. But I share some of the frustrations of the military commanders here in Ukraine, the Ukrainian people, in that there's pressure from the West to push harder on this offensive in Zaporizhia. But a NATO commander would want air superiority, number superiority, or they would want or artillery superiority, one at least. And F-16s were not a good idea in February. They were a good idea in May, and now they're maybe getting here soon. And what does it need? I think, what does it take? Everybody loves a winner. I think getting that Black Sea story out more. Yeah, the Black Sea. Ukraine has a navy smaller than that of the landlocked desert country of Jordan, yet they have just taken big pieces out of the Russian Black Sea fleet. They've taken out the Moskva, they've taken out the replacement for the Moskva, and they've destroyed the headquarters for the Black Sea fleet commanders.
This is the Hollywood story. It is.
Yeah.
No less.
And so these are just stories that need to get into the heads of Republican voters in places like Ohio, as you mentioned.
So are you saying that we have to deliver the quick and fast victory to make sure that Ukraine is really fighting for the human values that have to be protected all over the human universe, not only in Ukraine or Ohio, Oklahoma, New York, everywhere? So we have to be winning the hearts of ordinary Americans. And then the Senate will follow, then the Democrats will follow, the Republicans will follow. They will just have to.
Well, and here's the way I think about it, because I've spent my life doing political campaigns, and so the front in Zaporizhia is not the only front on which the Ukrainians are fighting the Russians. The Ukrainians are also fighting the Russians in the front of Russian propaganda, which is amazingly effective. And until I had friends who speak Russian and could explain to me what's going on in Russian media, I had no idea. And so that is a necessary front on which the Ukrainians have to focus. There's just new tools of diplomacy that the Ukrainians have to learn in order to be effective in that front.
Right. How do you assume the election campaign will affect the U.S. support for Ukraine? Any changes in amendments? Pause, maybe.
The U.S. presidential campaign is going to be nothing good for anybody on the policy front, because it all gets real silly really quickly. And so the good news is that we have some very articulate advocates for Ukraine on the presidential front. Mike Pence, former VP, very passionate about Ukraine. He's been here. You've got Nikki Haley, former ambassador to the UN. She is a fighter. If you watch the first presidential debate, and I recommend you do, and the second one too, she just takes it to people all about Ukraine. Tim Scott, another guy on the right place with Ukraine.
Thank you so very much, for your efforts, for where you are, for what you do, for your experience, and for your empathy, first of all, and for those two flags behind your back just as well.
hey, this is the reason I'm here. I could be in America with a good job, kicking back with a bottle of Chardonnay, watching Netflix every night. And but I'm here because this is important. America and Ukraine together and fighting for the stability of the world. So I'm proud and honored to be a part of this.
Thank you so very much. And I hope to talk to you soon. It was a lovely conversation, sir.
Yeah, let's get coffee.
Yeah, let's grab a coffee. Yeah, sure. Why not? Thank you.
You bet. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you so very much. Let me ask someone who knows everything. Not someone, something. Artificial intelligence. Here we go. Which country is the most protected by its air defense?
Missile defense systems are developed by several countries, and the level of their effectiveness can vary significantly from system to system. It's challenging to determine which country has the most robust missile defense, as it requires a complex analysis. For instance, the United States has one of the most advanced missile defense systems. The Theater High Altitude Area Defense System and the Aegis Ballistic Missile Defense System are just a few examples of American BMD systems. The Russian S-400 missile defense system is also known for its high effectiveness and power. Additionally, other countries like Israel, China, France, and India are also developing and improving their missile defense systems.
Watch this.
Talking about military, let's talk with military. Our next guest is already waiting.
Watch this.
Mr. Grant, it's nice to have you back with us. Hello.
It's nice to be here. Thank you very much.
My first question. Armed forces of Ukraine have achieved certain success at the front, but perhaps this is not the effect that is expected in the West. Maybe they expect more to be done. Do you think? Well, forgive me my quote, but maybe this is the case.
I think it's you can't lump the West together as sort of one organization. I think that most military pretty much expected what we've got at the moment. Although I think that there's nobody, and myself included, who wasn't surprised exactly how much defenses have been put up by Russia, because I mean they really have stuck a huge amount there. But you know, this is war, and you know, when you come to war, you've got to expect the other side to do as well as you want, because they're fighting this to death, just the same way that we are, and I think that we've underestimated Russia too much. I mean, we had an opportunity, no question. We had an opportunity at the back end of last year when we could have kept going and the Russians might have folded. But we gave them the winter to defend. We gave up the initiative again. And every time you give up the initiative, then the enemy takes it and makes something with it. So the West may have been surprised, but I'm going to say that any journalists that were surprised with what has been achieved so far, how good and how bad it is, whatever you want to look at it, then it means they haven't been doing their homework.
What's next? What we have to do so not
Wow,
to...
That's a serious question. I mean, the battle in the south, battle in the south is clearly a difficult one, and there's got to be more firepower put with it. There's no question. So where that firepower comes from, I don't know. How the general staff create more force in one small area, whether that's by, instead of doing long range stuff, throw some of the bigger stuff down just in front of the enemy and actually break it hard, or whether they move more guns from the east down there, more drones. But we've got to have more. The boys have got to have more firepower and actually more concentration, week on week on week, on the small things that infantry need. like more mortars, more mortar ammunition, grenades, grenade throwers, you name it. But things, even flamethrowers, even creating flamethrowers, it cannot be beyond the wit of Ukra to create flamethrowers, for God's sakes. I mean, it's not that difficult. People make them in their garages, and maybe it's time we did make some in our garages, because it's just basic weapons. You cannot ask the boys to push forward without proper firepower, and frankly, that's what they've been doing. So that is what's next. And if we don't have that, what's next, then we're in grave danger of actually Russia just overwhelming the front line by more people, which is what they're trying to do in the east at the moment.
The US Army is ready to hand over parts of the ATACMS missiles to Ukraine, finally. After this decision, other partner countries may also announce the transfer. How will ATACMS change the course of the war, you think? Will they change, do you believe?
It depends completely upon how it's used. I mean, ATACMS is an operational missile. It's not a tactical missile. So you use it to try and change the paradigm. Good word that you used. You try and change the paradigm of how things are happening. So one assumes that it will be used on more things that we've been using missiles on before, but at longer ranges. It also means that the Kerch Bridge and the approach roads are now well within range, and one would hope that you could actually do something very serious to the approaches to Crimea and to the naval base in Crimea that will actually force Russia to think about leaving it. And there is that possibility using ATACMS just to make Crimea untenable for Russian forces. Now, we know that America said you're not to use them inside Russia. Okay,
that's Ukraine.
That's fine. But there's still lots of area inside Ukraine that could do with a good stomping.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And Crimea is Ukraine, just by the way, just annexed.
And Crimea is Ukraine, absolutely.
So let's go.
And I mean, if we want to take the map back far enough, so's Sochi. If Russia plays this game, so why doesn't the Rada, Verkhovna Rada, say, well, now, the boundaries, we're taking the 1763 or whatever boundaries, and this is us.
Yeah, this is us. I mean, just look at the map.
Warfare.
Look at the map.
Hybrid warfare is allowed for not just for Russia. I mean, other countries can play hybrid warfare as well. But I mean, the other thing is that, of course, maybe just the sheer intensity of firepower of ATACMS can be used to shift the war in the south by making the area behind the front line absolutely untenable for soldiers. And that would certainly maybe ease things and move things on a bit quicker.
Thank you so very much. Let's leave the options how to use ATACMS to General Zaluzhny, but
General Staff, yeah,
the General Staff. But it was lovely to hear that there are options, at least, and many of them. So I'm sure the General Staff will be able to invent the way, if there is none, to use it the way.
I think they've already done. I think they've already done that. I think that the first one will arrive and leave quicker than it arrived.
Right, exactly.
Let's just say that.
Mr. Grant, thank you very much for your answers, for your time. Again, it was a pleasure to meet you and to talk with you.
Thank you very much. And let's hope that things keep going well, because the boys down south are really, really struggling with it as they move forward inch by inch by inch. And this is as bad as it's ever been in the war, and they need all the support and everything that can be made in garages by people. Please make it.
Thank you so very much for your words. I will let people know on the front line, the people I know, that you know what to do. And I will let people in the garages that I also know to maybe start making some fire throws already.
Thank you. Excellent.
Goodbye.
Okay, good night.
Good night. Thank you so very much for this beautiful conversation. Again, I would love to ask something that knows it all, artificial intelligence. Why not? Looks helpful. What was the harshest punishment for corruption in modern history?
The most severe punishment for corruption in recent history was the case of Jürgen Schneider, a German real estate magnate. Schneider was sentenced to 5 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud in the late 1990s. His case is notable for the significant financial losses and the impact on the real estate sector in Germany. Another example is the case of Park Geun-hye, the former president of South Korea, who was sentenced to 24 years in prison for corruption and abuse of power in 2018. This case marked a significant development in South Korea's fight against corruption. These examples highlight the determination of some countries to combat corruption and hold high-ranking officials accountable under the law.
If you ask me if we at The Gaze, at my show, know it all, no we don't. But we have a lovely guests and a lovely audience, and we would love to interconnect you. So, if you have questions, write us, find us on the social media. And please be sure we do our best to highlight the most interesting and hot events for you. Thank you so very much. Hope to see you soon.